alumni, colleagues and comrades, in my couple of minutes I thought I would cover off some of the legal issues arising from the conflict in Gaza. This week you've probably heard the Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court is seeking warrants for the arrest of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his Minister of Defence, Yoav Gallant, for crimes against humanity contrary to international criminal law. The charges are primarily directed to the deliberate starvation of the civilian population of Gaza because there is overwhelming and incontrovertible evidence to support those charges. There will be further charges. There are likely to be further charges in relation to war crimes and a charge of genocide. The deliberate and intentional destruction of an ethnic or racial group arising from the killing of more than 35,000 Palestinian people since October 7th, and the systemic blocking of access to housing, healthcare, food, water and electricity. Shame on you. Israel's blocking of the United Nations and ICC investigations in Gaza is preventing the collation of compelling evidence to support the charge of genocide, but it will come. Israel is not a signatory or a member to the Rome Statute that establishes and governs the ICC and sets out the 4 core crimes in international criminal law. But Palestine is. Palestine is accepted as a member, as a non-member observer state within the United Nations. That means that anyone, including Israelis, that commits crimes against international law on Palestinian whenua on their territory is within the jurisdiction of the ICC. Nations who are supplying arms, chemicals and technology to assist that is being used by Israel are therefore not only morally complicit but are legally liable at international law. So they will be charged also. The fact that the State of Israel, founded in the aftermath of the attempted genocide of European Jews, has pivoted from victim to perpetrator is a disgrace. You have conveniently forgotten that you said never again. If a warrant is issued by the ICC, this means that Netanyahu and others are subject to arrest if they set foot on the ground of any of the 124 member states, and numerous countries, including France, Belgium and Norway, have already declared that they will cooperate if that was to occur. The New Zealand government needs to make such a statement. Unsurprisingly, the United States is defending Israel, with President Biden claiming that they will sanction the ICC, which is a breach of the American obligations as a member state. Shame. He, along with German officials, has also incorrectly claimed that the ICC has equated the actions of Israel and the IDF with Hamas. They have not. The ICC has rightly identified the separate war crimes of both Israel and Hamas. They are seeking warrants for 3 senior officials of Hamas as well as Netanyahu and Gallant. They are appropriately maintaining neutrality and upholding the rule of law in relation to international law. War crimes committed by one side does not justify war crimes committed by the other. Upholding the rights of Palestinians does not mean being pro-Hamas. Upholding the rights of Palestinians does not mean being anti-Semitic. Biden's administration supported the ICC when it pursued Putin in relation to his actions in Ukraine, but has turned on them when it's come to their ally as Israel. Shame. You will no doubt have heard the common narrative that Israel has the right to self-defence in relation to response to the horrific October the 7th attacks by Hamas. That is not correct at international law. That is not correct at international law. The right to self-defence exists between nations in the UN Charter. Given that the very crux of this issue is Israel's denial of the rights of Palestinians to nation status, they cannot have their cake and eat it too. Armed conflicts within a nation are governed by international humanitarian law, which rests on 4 key principles: requiring parties to distinguish between combatants and civilians, to use force only for legitimate military purposes, to act proportionately in relation to perceived threats, and to treat people humanely. That includes civilians, detainees, and hostages. Israel continues to breach every one of those principles, both in the scale and the nature of the force used, including the use of the banned white phosphorus, the disregard shown to civilians, and its continued stronghold of blockade over Gaza. Israel has provided no independent evidence to verify its claims that the bombing of schools, hospitals, and civilian housing were targeted attacks on Hamas members. Even if Israel is to be believed that Hamas is using its own people as human shields, that does not justify the killing of civilians as a breach of proportionality principles and the humane treatment of civilians as non-combatants. There are numerous other ongoing legal issues here, particularly in relation to the rights being denied to the nearly 10,000 Palestinians being held in the custody of the State of Israel. A third of those people are being held without charge. A third of those people do not have the right to see the evidence held against them. Many of them are denied access to legal representation, to trial without undue delay. Captors include women and children and people held for decades without the rights of due process and fair trial. Shame. Many are beaten and ill-treated, not provided with food, medical treatment, or access to farming. This is unlawful. This is unlawful. It's part of the ongoing criminalisation of the Palestinian people, whereby 1 in 5 Palestinians will be arrested and charged in the course of their lives. 2 out of every 5 Palestinian men. If you do go to trial, you'll be tried in a military, not a civilian court, which are provided for all other Israeli citizens. The New Zealand government needs to declare its support for the ICC warrants. The New Zealand government needs to declare its intention to cooperate in the arrest of those people subject to warrants. The New Zealand government needs to create a special visa category for Gazan refugees, as it did for the people fleeing Russian aggression in Ukraine. The New Zealand government needs to recognise the state of Palestine. Finally, I want to say something as He Tamata Māori in solidarity with the Palestinian people as fellow Indigenous peoples, as we've already heard from our MC. The decades of injustice suffered by the peoples of Palestine has much in common with native peoples all over the world, who continue to suffer the effects of invasion, dispossession, suppression of our reo, our culture, our freedom and our mana motuhake, guaranteed to us as first peoples of our whenua by colonising forces. In this country, our rights are affirmed by Te Tiriti o Waitangi, but they are also embedded in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which sets out a framework of minimum standards for survival, dignity and well-being of Indigenous peoples. That is in addition to the human rights and fundamental freedoms afforded to all human beings. Those rights apply equally to Palestinians as they do to us as iwi Māori. This fight is also being played out in our backyard into Wananui-a-Kiwa, of course with our Kanak whanaunga and the island of Kanake here in the Pacific, for the control to wrest the control of their whenua from the French. As tamata whenua of Aotearoa, we send our aroha and our solidarity to our Kanak whanaunga as well as to Palestinians. Solidarity from us to you. Ka whawhai tonu mātou, mai te awa o te wana. Kia ora.